favorite sake that you had tonight, and I think we should raise a glass to Japan. I think it would be greatly honored. They do, in fact, need our help as much as we can. Drink Japanese sake and eat Japanese food. It will go a very long way. So to Japan, please. As Sam said, 9 years ago, I fell in love with sake so much that I decided to kind of alter my life. And I opened up the first dedicated sake store outside of Japan. And people asked me why, and I said, well, I think I'm the only one dumb enough to do something like that. But in 10 years, I realized that sake is such an incredible product that my initial philosophy of who would come to my store, initially I thought I would have 50% wine-drinking customers and 50% Japanese customers. And not one of those people showed up. Thank you. Not one of those people showed up. I got to disenfranchise wine drinkers, and I didn't really get a lot of Japanese people. I got disenfranchised wine drinkers because sake is a new slope that you can lay your own tracks on. Wine has been Robert Parkerized. A lot of people have talked about it. Nothing against wine. But sake represents this fresh slope that you can lay your own tracks on. So my customer base started out not wine drinkers, but now the wine drinkers are coming. And so I'm very glad that the IWC has incorporated sake. I have a couple different points I'm going to talk about the association with sake and wine. Now, I am a salesman. I sell sake. Making sake is incredibly difficult. Ken touched upon it. It is one of the hardest manufactured libations out there. Absolutely, without question. I love you. A lot of people have misconceptions about sake. In the beginning, I called it less than zero. People thought that sake was a distilled beverage, a hard alcohol. Did anybody ever think that sake was a hard alcohol? Basically like a distilled beverage, a booze, if you will. People would tell me, oh, we get so drunk because it's a hard alcohol. It's up there with tequila and rum and gin. And I said, absolutely not. They said, well, how can I feel different? And I said, well, it's a different kind of feeling. It's a different kind of buzz. A lot of people think that you always must have sake hot. Now, that was another momentum shifter that I had to change. Sake, obviously, tonight as we're tasting, is not meant always to be served hot. And the third one was small cups. You must always drink sake in little ochoko. Now, I decided tonight to talk about what's hurting the industry and what's helping the industry. And so, England is very much like the United States, but I will be so bold as to say we are perhaps 3 or 4 years along in the evolution of sake acceptance. And I'll explain that in a minute. But let's go sort of what's going through the herding process. By the way, what is the name of that one Japanese restaurant that is the sort of the best Japanese sushi or sake restaurant here?
Nobu.
Nobu? No, not Nobu. Sakura. No, known for sake.
Umu.
Umu.
Yeah.
I don't want to piss anybody off, but 2 years ago I went into Umu, 2 kikizakishi on the staff, two trained professionals to sell sake. I walked around the restaurant, and I counted 120 people. And of 120 people, there were 2 people drinking sake. And I was like, ay, caramba, we gotta make movements in some regards. So this is what's hurting the sake industry. First of all, I think there's a partnership with restaurants. Restaurants are doing a very big disservice to sake because they don't exactly know what it is. Restaurants, if you find, and please, if you ever go to a restaurant and they serve you a 2-ounce pour of sake in what looks like a shot glass, I tell you what, double that and put it in a wine glass and bring it back to me. Because what the restaurateurs are doing is they're serving sake in 2-ounce glasses, charging a ton of money for it, and then it's on the same menu where you get a pretty good glass of wine for $5. It's a complete, absolute disadvantage. I'll get that. Sake in the United States and sake in Britain, I would very well imagine, is a little bit older than it is in Japan. We have transportation issues, and so it degrades a little bit better. Sake is a perishable beast. Ken spoke to you, but we have a shelf life. And another disassociation that we kind of have to emphasize with wine is wine wins the battle or the war of you can age it. You can take wines and lay it down for a while. Sake is perishable. You should drink it between 12 months and maybe 13, 14 months after a bottling date, after a release date. If somebody's given you a bottle that you have, it's in your basement, and you've had it there for 2 years, open it, and open it soon. But you should drink sake within about 12 months. I dare you, go to restaurants too. There are release dates on the labels. Read the date. When is it released? Then, secondly, sake, as it's pasteurized, once you open a bottle of sake, think in terms of something that's been pasteurized, like orange juice. Wine gets kind of grotty the next day, doesn't it? You'll open a bottle, it has 2 or 3 days, you can do your little air machines and do whatever. It doesn't quite help, but think of a pasteurized beverage. Sake has great longevity. It'll stay in your fridge for 3-4 days without changing flavor. I've had bottles in my fridge for up to 3 months. Then, if it ever gets a little bit, not grotty, just off a little bit, you warm it up. Heating, as we learned the hard way in the States, is sort of a masking agent for inferior or bad sake, and I'll talk about that too. Names. How come everybody in the world can remember Chateau Lafite, but they can't remember Ichishima? How come, seriously, why can't we do it? One of the biggest complaints I have is when people come to my stores like, I had this sake, it was in a blue bottle. No more. It was, and they know the category. They'll come and say, it's a Yamahai Jumai. I'm like, that's like coming and saying you had a Chardonnay. Help me with that Chardonnay. So name is another issue. Now, what's kind of helping the industry? I'm going to slip the helping now. Now, you know what, and I wrote 6, and again, we will talk about it. The perception of sake is still sort of I'm going to pick on wine guys in a minute, but the other most hurting aspect is this nuclear accident, and we'll talk in a little bit depth about that. What's helping the industry? Importers. Importers today have started putting frontline people out there working, hand-selling sake a little bit more. In the United States, how sake got there initially, well, it went through basically Hawaii 100 years ago, where the first sort of Japanese rice farmers went to Hawaii to become farmers in Hawaii, and they opened breweries, and that was 100 years ago. But I like to say that the Ginjo sort of movement is in the past 10 years. And we have 3 tiers that have come in to promote and sell sake. The first are importers, Japanese importers, who imported food, Japanese foods, and then they also imported sakes. But these guys only went to Japanese restaurants. They would go to sushi restaurants, and that's about it. And then they would sell the sake to the sushi restaurants. Then about 10 years ago, we had what I'll call Western importers started importing. And I know the same things happened in Britain. So then the Western importers came in, they started like getting in bed with the wine guys and started basically distributing to Western restaurants a little bit more. And then the third, for our case in the States, is we have locally made sakes. Now I guarantee you, you can drink American sake in London because I've seen it on 3 different menus. So that was kind of the process of how sake got to the States and subsequently got to London. Now, what's helping the industry? What helps sell sake? First of all, when I had a store, people would come in and look, on first inspection, I look like a white guy, don't I? On second inspection, I don't speak Japanese, and on third inspection, I can't read Japanese. So I had a store, and I had bottles that looked like this, and people came in and said, what is it? And I was like, I had to figure out a way to teach people what it is. And what I did is I developed a system called Taste Match, where if you can speak to your beer and wine profiles, then I can put you into a sake that sort of fits. Under the principle that if you like a big Zinfandel, if you like a big Guinness, you're going to like a different sake than somebody who likes a Sauvignon Blanc and like a Kirin. They kind of overlap, like Taste Match, so it's kind of help. Buzzwords. I have to deal in buzzwords. Sake is built like beer, but drinks like wine. You guys, Ken was saying, like, how do you speak about sake? Use your wine vernacular. You guys know there's 300 aroma components and 450 flavor components in sake. Everybody's afraid of speaking about sake. I can't talk about it. They'll tell you 10 different things about the Sauvignon Blanc they're drinking, and then they'll taste sake and they just go, it just tastes like sake. Experience helps, but again, use your vernacular. The brewers, incredibly important. There's a brewer in this room right now. The new, and I will call it generation of brewers, aren't their father's brewers. Their father's brewers never really traveled, never went internationally as much as this younger, new generation. These guys are traveling, they're coming to London, they're going to restaurants, and they want their sakes in restaurants. So they're traveling a lot, and it's outstanding to see them do that. They're hand-selling the brews, and it's incredibly important.